Major emergencies at sea involving danger to life, the ship, or the environment are rare. When an emergency does occur, those on board will face a situation of extreme stress. Decisions will need to be made quickly, even though the situation will not always be completely clear. The only way that ship's personnel can prepare themselves for this is through training. It is the objective of this program to demonstrate how to respond in an emergency in order to prevent loss of life and to limit damage as much as possible. To assist personnel in responding to emergencies, many operators and owners have an emergency response plan, sometimes called a contingency plan.
Contingency plans in the marine industry are of the absolute utmost importance. Primarily, unless you have a plan that you have thought about, that you have practiced for, your response during a time of emergency is going to be uncoordinated, random, and not very effective. It's for these reasons that you must have contingency plans practiced and in place to deal with emergency situations.
So the vessel superintendent...
This plan will be specifically designed for each ship. It will be primarily an operational plan. It will be a concise, self-contained document. It will guide the personnel through the stages of an incident in a predetermined way that will combine with the ship's shore office response.
Page 10, telephone numbers and emergency information. So a valet with all the information able to deal with the emergency situation.
There are 5 steps in responding to an emergency. First, finding out what is happening and starting the response. What type of incident is it? Are there any casualties? Is there any damage to the cargo or hull? The second stage is the initial notification, informing the coastal state and the owner or operator. Circumstances may warrant sending out an emergency call for help. Thirdly, evaluation and stabilization of the incident, working out possible courses of action while continuing the response. Fourthly, more detailed notification of the coastal state, the owner and operator, and other interested parties. Vessels in United States waters must in addition notify the National Response Center. Fifthly, continuing the planned response, minimizing the effects of the incident. These stages may well be subdivided differently in your ship's plan, but in essence, they will be the same.
This is the emergency contingency plan of our company. In this, they have given everything concerning emergency.
The plan will include an action checklist to ensure that in the heat of the moment during an emergency, no essential task is overlooked. The plan will contain a list of the interested parties who will need to be notified in an emergency. This list must be updated regularly. The plan must be kept with other essential documents and must be easily accessible to those operating the ship. It is vital to know and understand the emergency plan on your ship. Should an emergency occur, it will be too late then to start examining the plan to discover what you must do.
Apart from that, you have various emergencies checklist given, so that when you have any emergency of this kind, you know what is to be done.
For this reason, it is important to hold regular exercises of the emergency plan. This will be in addition to mandatory boat and fire drills. Large-scale exercises involving the entire ship take time to organize, and so may interfere with the vessel's operations. So, although exercises can be arranged by those on board, they can also be organized by an officer from the shore office.
Good afternoon. How are you? Fine. Everything okay? Everything ready? Everything ready. Okay, we go.
The ship's officers and crew know that they're going to take part in an exercise, but none, not even the master, knows exactly what it entails. The supervising officer has already worked out a scenario for the exercise.
Basically, your vessel collided with a small coastal tanker and the position of the...
At a suitable moment in the ship's operations, he informs the master that his ship has had a collision with a small coastal oil tanker. His ship has been hit amidships on the port side, just above the waterline. 2 of the crew have been injured, there is a small fire, and a danger of flooding.
Yes.
Right.
The master first alerts the engine room.
Hello, engine room. May I speak to the chief engineer? Yes, chief. We are carrying out an exercise where we have a collision with a small tanker. So all the announcements you hear will be just for an exercise.
He then makes an announcement to everyone on board, telling them that they're about to participate in an exercise practicing the ship's response to a collision.
We are going to have an exercise where the ship has had a collision. So when you hear the emergency alarm, please go to your respective muster stations. I repeat, we are going to carry out an exercise now where the ship has had a collision. So when you hear the emergency alarm, please go to your respective muster stations. Thank you.
The master gives the order to sound the signal to summon the crew to their muster stations. He then gets out the emergency contingency plan.
The importance of mustering during an emergency is quite often underestimated. It is of the absolute paramount importance that people continue to use the mustering system. When things start to go wrong on ships, they tend to happen very rapidly, and quite often people don't appreciate that things have gone wrong. In the incidents that I have been involved in real incidents at sea, on board ships, we have almost seemed to detect it's another drill. It is not happening to us. And it often takes the ringing of the alarm bells, for example, before people focus that there is a real incident, and this is not an exercise.
At this stage, the master would send an emergency message to warn the coastal state of the collision and to summon assistance. He also notifies his owner or operator of the incident, arranging to call them back when he has more information. With the coastal state authorities and the ship's operator, it's important to agree a schedule of communication and to keep to it.
The exact position of your vessel and if she is in immediate danger.
Otherwise, the master will find himself continually fielding calls from anxious shore-based staff, not what he needs during an emergency. How frequently the ship should talk to them will depend on the incident and how quickly things are likely to change. Mustering the crew not only allows a check for casualties, it also imposes a sense of order and discipline. One thing missing during any exercise is the sense of fear that would be felt by everyone at some stage in a real incident.
Second officer.
Yes, sir.
Bosun. Yes, sir. Naruna.
Yes, sir.
This changes people's behavior. One reason is the body's automatic reaction to threatening situations. This has been called the fight or flight response. It prepares the body to either defend itself or flee from the threat. Adrenaline is pumped into the bloodstream. The heart beats faster and blood flows to the muscles and brain and away from the skin and digestive tract. Sweating increases, whereas the salivary glands are deactivated, making the mouth dry. Everyone involved in an emergency is liable to experience these changes to some degree.
Prasad. Prasad.
A further important psychological issue, especially if fire is involved, is the possibility of panic.
Sattar. Sattar.
Avoidance of this will depend on good training and what sort of relationship the master has with his crew. In short, leadership.
Bridge to chief mate.
In a real incident, the master may need to resort to extraordinary measures to avoid the onset of panic. He will need to rely on his emergency and fire party, usually under the command of the chief officer. At this stage, the master is informed that 2 men are missing.
OS Sattar is missing, sir.
They've been instructed by the supervising officer to act as casualties.
Okay, then do one thing. You
The
send
master,
party
in
one,
consultation with the chief officer, decides on the
party two,
priorities for the emergency
ingress
party.
of water, and you take
First
control
is the
of
fire, which could threaten everyone on board. Secondly, the missing personnel need to be found and taken care of. Thirdly, the flooding must be stopped or brought under control.
And I take control of the fire, sir. We have collision abreast number 3 hatch on port side. Water is flooding in number 3 hatch. And
The
there's
chief
a fire
officer
out
then
to number 3,
assigns
the mast
tasks
house.
to each party.
Party 1, second officer in charge, missing people and first aid.
One party
two
goes
person
to search
in
for the
charge,
missing crew
ingress of
members.
water, damage control, take soundings. Rest of the people come with me with the fire extinguisher and fire hoses. Fire hose party, extinguishers.
The chief officer with the emergency and fire party make their way to the area of the collision with the equipment they will need to fight the fire. The hold is sounded to determine the water level. The exercise scenario dictates that the water level is about 3 meters. The chief officer is informed.
Number 3, port gill sounding 3.5 meters, sir.
The search party find the casualties and carry them to safety. The first priority is to move them out of danger. They are then put in stretchers and given first aid. This information is relayed to the bridge.
Emergency station to the bridge. So the search party has found 2 missing people with minor injuries. We are giving first aid to them.
The chief officer gives the master a full account of the situation. He is told that boundary cooling is taking place, the casualties have been found, and that there is water ingress in the hold.
I suggest we start the bilge pump, sir.
Understood.
Once he has got the preliminary report and can assess the situation, the master is able to give a detailed report to the organizations listed in the emergency plan.
Start the bilge pump and start pumping out number 3 hole bilges. Dover Coast Guard, this is Atlas calling Dover Coast Guard. Do you read me?
Generally, the authorities of the nearest coastal state will be the first on the list. Next will come the operator or owner, then other interested parties. All the contact numbers needed will be found in the emergency plan.
Welcome. Over and out.
This will also contain a list of the information required by the contacts. Most of the items are obvious, such as the ship's position, but they are all listed, as in the stress of an emergency, even the obvious can be overlooked.
It's 51 degrees, 01 minutes,
Good
north.
communications between ship and shore are vital in any incident.
Okay, do you have the collision checklist with you?
It's essential that the information given is as accurate as possible to enable all shore-based parties to provide the maximum assistance.
Okay, that will be fine. So just keep me informed about everything. Third, you
The master will need to devote all his efforts to managing the response. He will ask the engine room to prepare the equipment needed to respond. He should remain on the bridge as much as possible during any emergency. He may feel he needs to visit the actual scene of the incident to see for himself what is going on. But for most of the time, he should leave the on-scene organization up to his senior officers. Good leadership will be essential, and it's only from the bridge that the master can effectively coordinate the activities of the engine room, deck department, and the shore-based agencies, including his own head office.
The ideal relationship between the captain and a head office during an incident is one of complete trust. The master has to be able to go to head office for advice and with honest information and have no fear of recrimination. Any master who tries to cover things up or not tell the whole story to the office is only hurting himself, his crew and his ship. Because in a well-managed shipping company today, there is a lot of expertise and a lot of advice available to him. And unless he is giving the whole picture to his head office, they cannot assist him in making a proper balanced judgment of the situation.
The shore office have an essential role to play in their ship's response to any incident.
So here we
They
are
will
with
have their
ship's
own
plan.
company contingency plan, as well as a copy of the ship's emergency plan. The two will be interrelated. The shore-based emergency team should consider themselves to be an integral part of the ship's emergency response. They can summon assistance, get expert technical advice, and take the weight of notification of interested parties, such as the P&I Club, Charterer and others, away from the master.
What is the condition of your steering gear and other equipment?
They need to keep to the mutually agreed schedule of communication and not call the master every few minutes for an update.
That is unknown to us.
In real incidents, it has always taken much longer than expected for the shore center to establish precisely what is happening.
Damage to the other
It may be worth keeping a satellite link open during the early stages of an incident, if this will help the master. It is important to record what happens and what decisions are made and when. All times must be written down, and all charts with notes or plots on them retained. Any photographic or video record will be extremely helpful afterwards. In determining the best response, accurate cargo data is essential, as is an up-to-date general arrangement. Are there any hazardous materials involved or near the place of impact? If there are, or if there is any likelihood of a spill overboard, then the coastal state must be notified. Those involved in damage assessment parties will be looking for hull damage and damage to pipework and other equipment in and around the area of impact. All holds, tanks and void spaces will need to be sounded.
Sir, this is the weather report I've received.
Okay, thank you. So third, the weather forecast is not good for next 8 hours.
Yes, sir.
Where are we now?
Sir, floating, sir.
Okay.
Has the ship lost maneuverability? Accurate tide and wind information will be essential to predict what is likely to happen to the damaged ship. Throughout the exercise, the supervising officer has not only been feeding in events and information as dictated by the incident scenario, he has also been observing how the ship's personnel have responded. This is not an attempt to catch them out, but rather to see what the problems are likely to be on their ship should an incident occur. The damage assessment party have investigated the water level in the hold. Their findings are reported to the master.
Captain, the damage is already underwater and it is also under seawater level. The level is rising, it's about 4 meters now. I suggest you ask the engine room to increase the pumping rate. Over.
Water is
He listens to their recommendations. In any real emergency, the master would need to rely on his senior officers.
Okay, then
He will
that
need
be
to
fine.
take
Keep
their
me informed
advice.
about it. Third, you ring up engine room and tell him to give us maximum rate on the Bell's pump so that we can maintain the level of water in number 3 hold.
Yes, sir.
The master keeps his office informed of all
Nearest
developments.
port of refuge is Dunkirk, which is 24 miles off. Over.
Any oil spill or pollution?
Negative, there is no oil spillage.
That's understood. We will notify the P&I Club, underwriters and vessels owners.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm calling you regarding the motorist Atlas sustained...
In this exercise scenario, as the ship is not in danger, the shore office is calling salvage companies to put tugs on standby in case the ship needs assistance.
Romeo, Oscar,
If the ship
6,
was in peril,
and my telephone
the
number
master
is
would make his
Monte
own
Carlo
arrangements with salvage tugs on the basis of Lloyd's open form, without needing to discuss this with his office.
and,
On deck, the chief officer decides that the fire is sufficiently under control to allow access to the burning hold. One of the two men dressed in protective clothing enters. The
thank you.
master has been talking to the shore authorities as well as his operator's office. He may receive unwanted calls from the
Yes,
press
this is
and
the
other
Atlas,
shore-based agencies.
Master speaking.
He should say as little as possible, referring all inquiries to his shore office.
Please contact my office. They'll give you all the details. Over.
Before we go to the press, can we just go through one by one the actions we've taken to date, make sure we've covered all the bases?
In reality, it would not be long before the press heard about the emergency. It's their job to get the facts, and it's up to the shore office to give them.
Off Dunkirk at around 14:30 local time.
The shore office should do what they can to divert press attention from the master dealing with the incident.
Cargo vessel Atlas. We believe that there were some slight casualties.
As the ship is still able to make way, the master decides to take her to a suitable port of refuge.
We suggest you proceed to Dunkirk and take refuge there to investigate the underwater damage.
He discusses this with his shore office and confirms that tugs have been requested. He asks them to organize a tug to stand by in the port in case the ship gets into difficulties.
You will need to call port authorities and inform the Coast Guard about your movements.
In any incident, decisions need to be taken all the time. The master and the emergency team will always need their wits about them. They must maintain good communications, informing each other of what they're doing. They must be ready to adapt their response to fit changing situations. Things can change rapidly and in unpredictable ways in an emergency. The crewman who has entered the hold signals that the fire is now out.
The fire is out, sir, and the pumps are coping with the bilge level. Water is maintained to 3 meters in the bilges.
At this point, the supervising officer decides that, as all the objectives have been achieved, the exercise should now be ended.
All right.
He tells the master.
Okay, Captain Kumar, on deck was everything okay? We can consider the end of the exercise. You have to advise all the people involved, and later on we have to meet together for debrief about the exercise.
The master first informs the engine room by telephone.
Yes, engine room? Chief engineer? Yes, the exercise is over now, Chief. Okay, thank you.
He then broadcasts to everyone on board. They're told to return to their normal duties.
Your attention, ship's company. The exercise is over now. I repeat, the exercise is over now.
Okay, the training exercise went well. The response on collision was carried out in the right way.
After the exercise is completed, there is a formal debriefing. All actions and responses are analyzed to see where they could be improved.
Everything was good. One of the men of the fire party number 2 was not holding correctly the fire hose.
If necessary, the emergency plan itself may be modified or updated to take account of circumstances that have changed or lessons that have been learned.
Point that you want to discuss or...
Major emergencies are very rare at sea. This is all the more reason why the emergency plan should be exercised. In any emergency, it is important to use the emergency plan as a basis for the response, to ensure that there is good teamwork and communications between those running the emergency response, that there is solid backup from the shore office. It is essential that the emergency plan has been frequently exercised so that everyone understands their role. Good training is the only way to prepare everyone on board to deal with emergencies.
Exercises are very important. They allow the contingency plan to be tested, for the weaknesses to be found, for the poor communication links to be found. And unless you have exercises and unless you run them in real time, then we're not going to learn anything. And our own experience has been that by having exercises, we have found weak points in our contingency plans and therefore been able to strengthen them and hopefully be more effective in dealing with an incident.
With a realistic and well-rehearsed emergency contingency plan, ships will be ready to respond effectively and promptly should the unforeseen occur. In doing so, they will be contributing not only to their own safety, but also to the safety of the world's seaways.